It's the tool that I found to be the absolute most helpful in getting me through the hard moments of motherhood and not succumbing to anger or frustration or resentment or any of those really, really difficult emotions. Hello, and welcome to today's episode of What We Tell Our Daughters. Today is a short and sweet episode, and I want to talk about my 5 biggest lessons of motherhood thus far. I think that for every woman, for every parent, this is going to be different. But if you're a aspiring parent or a new parent or someone who's in the thick of it, like I currently am, I hope this can be helpful because it is hard to be thoughtful of our minds and the stories that we have going on in the background and the beliefs that we create about our life and the way that things are structured or the hand that we've created for ourselves in many ways. But I think that the ability to pause and pull back the curtain on what's really happening in the deep corners of your brain and your psyche and your belief system is really, really important. And it's the tool that I found to be the absolute most helpful in getting me through the hard moments of motherhood and not succumbing to anger or frustration or resentment or any of those really, really difficult emotions. I think some of these kind of findings and beliefs that I've created for myself are really valuable in setting me free. And so I want to share them today, and I hope that maybe they help you a little along the way. Here are a few things that I've been thinking about lately. So, the first one is just that, and I say this all the time, my child will never be the same as she is today. This one is so important. In our household, I put our daughter to sleep every single night. And that's partly because she just has a really hard time. It takes a really long time with anyone else. There's a lot of screaming, there's a lot of crying. And while, yes, there's a little voice in my head that says, she has to be able to do this with other people, there's also a little voice in my head that says, she's still just a baby. And I'm never going to get these moments back. So be okay with being the person that puts her to bed every night because tomorrow she will be different than she is today. Tomorrow I'll have slightly different snuggles than I have today. And so, whenever I start to feel frustrated or exhausted at the end of the day, that I'm in the bedtime saga again, which for us sometimes takes an hour and a half at the worst, too, but it is not a short process, it is a long process. Um, I just remind myself these are the moments that one day I'm going to look back on and wish that I had more of. And they go fast and they are fleeting. So, if you're in this right now and you feel like this is helpful, this is kind of the mantra I repeat to myself as I'm putting her to bed, or if she's being like particularly feisty at bedtime, I just say, she's never going to be the same as she is today. So let me just soak all of this up and be here with her, be here for it because I won't get it again quite the same way. That's the first one. The second one I've come to realize as parenthood has continued for me, and I look back on some of the beliefs that I had or ideas I had about how I was going to be a parent. And I realized that I should never make decisions about parenthood before I reach that stage in my child's life. Things that I was so sure that I would do at this stage in her life, I just don't. And it's not because philosophically anything has changed. I still have the same belief system about what it means to raise children and what they need to be successful. But I think what has changed partially is my perception of what my child needs. I'm actually a way bigger softie than I thought I would be, which is an interesting experience. I remember before I had children, I would look at people who breastfed their children when they cried or when they had pain when they were over the age of like 1. And I would be like, oh, they're just coddling them, like let the child work through the pain themselves. And I completely disagree with that perspective now, being on the other side of it and understanding that When you breastfeed a child, you give them oxytocin, which gives them pain relief. So you are helping them work through that process and showing them what that process can be like because they're at a point in their life where they don't understand words. And so the best thing I can do is physically help them through that process so that when the day comes that it is time for them to do that on their own, their body and their nervous system remembers how to do it rather than throwing them into that process maybe earlier than their physiological body is able and willing to do that themselves. So there's no shame from me, no matter what you choose. Remember, I was the person who thought that I would never do this with my child, but for us and for our daughter, I've realized this is really what works, and this is something that I'm going to do. So that is my lesson number two: is don't get ahead of yourself. Really, just be in this moment and learn your child, understand them, get to know them better and better, because that is what's going to dictate how you parent and how you show up for them, not these preconceived notions about how you think things should be. The third one is not really a big revelation, but it kind of ties into number one, which is snuggles are everything. They really are. And I know that before I can even blink my eyes, my daughter won't want to snuggle with us anymore. And so even when it drives me crazy, when she's kicking me in the stomach at 2 a.m. and I can't sleep at all, I really am trying to remind myself and embody, well, that's not the right word. Can you tell I'm tired? I'm trying to remind myself that these are the moments I'm going to want back. And so to just really be present with them instead of being frustrated, instead of wishing things were a different way, because we can always wish things were a different way, but is that going to really change the way they are? And sure, I guess I could try sleep training with her or do some other things that might change her behavior a bit, but those aren't the behaviors that I feel I need to help shape. Those are behaviors that are just her personality, just the way she wants to connect with you. And those aren't fair for me to shape for me. I didn't choose, or she didn't choose to come into this world. I chose to have her. And my husband, I think one of his mentors actually told him, like, your kids don't owe you anything. You owe them everything. And that's completely true, in my opinion, because our children didn't choose to come here. I mean, maybe they did, and maybe they chose us as their parents. But ultimately, we're the ones that made it happen. We're the ones that grew them, that brought them into this world. They don't owe us anything. It is completely up to us to help be there for them. And if that means giving her snuggles in the middle of the night, which is also partly kicking me in the belly, so be it, because there will be a day where I wish that I had more of those. Now, the fourth one is something that's taken me a long time to come to terms with. Before we had our daughter, I would often think to myself, when she's about one, we're going to go out, we're going to have our normal, like young life back, right? We had this idea that even when she was tiny, like at 3 months old, we were going to start going back on having a Friday date night every single week. And now we're at 16, almost 17 months, and she doesn't sleep through the night. She sleeps with us. As you heard, she pretty much only goes to bed with me. And that's just kind of the reality of this little human that we brought into the world. And I think my party days are over, quite honestly, until a future later date in my life. And instead of being frustrated or sad about that, I've really come to terms with the fact that that is just part of this human's journey, right? Maybe if she was a different child, it wouldn't be the same. But being okay with not doing everything, with leaving some little bits of you behind for the moment so that you can rekindle them at a later date is something that I've decided I'm okay with. I am okay with not going out partying until 2 a.m. And when I say partying, mostly I mean just like going out and dancing and having a good time. Like I really do miss those days, but I know they will come again. And I've come to a place where I'm okay with them not being here because I think the other side of not being okay with it is this constant like internal struggle where you feel frustrated or resentful because you want to do this thing, but your child is not the type of child that allows for that easily. Like, as a backstory, we did this once for Andrew's birthday. My husband, we went out to dinner. We didn't come home till like maybe 11:30, and our daughter had fallen asleep for like an hour and then woken up, and she'd been awake with the babysitter for a good 2.5 hours, and she was utterly insane when we got home. She was running around the house. It took me 2 more hours after we got home to get her to sleep because she was so amped up. And I know that with time, this would become easier, and with more practice, it is partly that, but it's also partly my willingness to just say, you know what? This is not my era for this. My era will come again. I would rather completely be there to support my daughter in this very early moment of her life where she has no logic, she has no reasoning, she doesn't understand why we're gone or that we're coming home. Her perception of time is completely different than our perception of time. So to her, maybe us going out for dinner feels like literally an eternity when she doesn't even know if we'll come home. And I know that those sound like small things, and there's many different belief systems and camps in parenthood. Whatever you do that works for your family, like I'm in awe of the mothers and the families I know who are like, oh yeah, at like 3 months we could go out and leave our daughter with their grandma and she was fine. Maybe if we had grandmas here, it would be easier, but um, I've decided that's just not something I'm willing to put my daughter through. So I won't for now, and that day will come. And then finally, this last kind of insight comes from having really big dreams about everything I want to do in a day. I love morning because there's so much possibility in the morning. Morning, you wake up and you're like, I have this whole day ahead of me. I have so many things that I want to do. I'm going to do them all today. And day after day, I think that to myself. And day after day, I do some of those things. I always manage to accomplish some of them, but do I ever manage to accomplish all of them? No. And sometimes my dreams are a little bit too big. Like I'm going to sit down and journal and meditate for 20 minutes each every morning. Then I'm going to read a book before I go to bed every night. So I have some learning time. In the middle, I'm going to take care of my daughter and do all my work and all of these things. And it's just an unrealistic expectation. And it's funny that I set these goals for myself because I purposely don't set these kinds of goals for my clients. I always tell them baby steps, tiny habits. A bite is better than none. So, like, one trick that I always use that maybe this will help you is do something for 2 minutes. And if you want to stop after 2 minutes, great. But once you've started, sometimes you've gained enough momentum to actually make it happen because we can all find 2 minutes in a day, right? It's a lot harder to say, okay, I actually have 20 minutes right now. So if I take my own advice, I have 2 minutes. Okay, I'm going to sit down and meditate for 2 minutes. And maybe at the end of 2 minutes, I'm like, you know what? I will give it another five. Or maybe on that particular day, I just have so much happening. I'm like, okay, today's not the day. I only get 2 minutes. But usually what happens is once you've taken that first tiny step, the rest kind of falls into place and you're a lot more likely to actually finish out a fuller amount of time doing whatever it is that you've decided you can do. Exercise. This works really great with exercise. You can say, okay, I'm going to run for 2 minutes. If I hate it after 2 minutes, then I give myself permission to stop. But usually, once you've started, you're a lot more likely to just finish out the run or go for 10 minutes or whatever it may be. So, this actually maybe should have been like number two. I think this one is really, really helpful and super important. And that is that tiny moments matter so much more than one big chunk. If you have 1 minute, do not discredit that minute. Go listen to your favorite song for 1 minute. Go meditate for 1 minute. Journal for 1 minute. Go just take some deep breaths or sit in a corner. Or, I mean, I love the song because I think music puts us in a really, really good place and a really good state throughout the day. But it's basically the idea of atomic tiny habits, habit stacking. But more so, it's like not not being the all or nothing person, giving yourself permission to be the tiny bite person at this stage in life. And I think that as we grow those habits, time becomes longer. We become better at maintaining them for a longer amount of time, but also not to discredit how much good we can do in a very short amount of time. So that's my little musings on motherhood for the day. And I hope this was maybe helpful or interesting. And really, like, I would have loved to have this conversation with someone. So if you're someone that's curious or interested about in talking about this, just send me a message and let me know, because I'd love to chat with you on this podcast about it. The musings of motherhood and what really matters. So just as a little recap, your child will never be the exact same child they are today. Make the most of it. Today is the last day you're ever going to see this same little person. Number two is don't make decisions about parenthood before you reach that stage in their life, or at least for me, I'll say I won't make decisions about parenthood until I reach that stage in their life. Snuggles are everything. This is not my age to party. This is my message to myself is just don't try to do it all, mama. Like, let yourself focus on what really fills you up and moves the needle and helps you become the best version of yourself, and know that those days will come. And right now, if it's creating so much friction and so much tension in your life, maybe it's not the time for that. And tiny moments are more valuable than one big chunk. So take advantage of them all. Every last second that you have in the day is one that can be valuable. It doesn't mean you have to spend every single moment doing something. It just means that you shouldn't discredit that extra minute. Do something beautiful with it if that's what your body needs and that's what your mind needs for the day. So I hope you found this helpful. Thanks for listening and being a sounding board for the thoughts in my head. And I'll see you in the next episode.